Welcome to One on One. I'm Phil Tillman, your host, and today I'm delighted to welcome into our studios Dr. John LaFerla, candidate for Congress from the 1st Congressional District. Welcome.
Thank you,
Doctor.
Phil. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
All right. Well, first of all, let's let everybody know. We know that the Eastern Shore of Maryland's in the 1st Congressional District. There's some of us that still wish that was all there was in the 1st Congressional District. What other areas of Maryland does it take in now?
Well, you know, before the redistricting in 2010, it did go over the Bay Bridge a bit into Anne Arundel County. That got changed, and now when you get all the way up to Cecil, you have to start heading west, and you go over the northern part of Harford County, some parts of Baltimore County, and now some parts of the northern part of Carroll County are all in District 1. So our district goes from Taneytown to Pocomoke.
Wow. So in campaigning for this job, you're going to put quite a few miles on a car, aren't you?
A lot of miles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're delighted to have you in,
Thank you.
in this part of Maryland, which we think is a pretty good part,
Yep.
Wycomico County. And that's where our signal goes to those people in Wycomico County who have cable TV.
Sure.
So tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I've been a physician all my life. I have the pleasure of looking after women and families, and I've delivered about 5,000 babies in my lifetime.
Wow.
I've also been involved in public health. I've been in academics. I've been in an HMO for a while, and for the last 14 years, I've been in private practice here on the shore. My office was in Chestertown, where I delivered almost 800 babies, and now the last few years, just doing gynecology in Centerville. I've also worked at some clinics in Goldsboro, Denton, and Easton as well.
Golly dang. So quite a background.
Right, yep, well, thank you.
Now, are you still working?
Well, I'm working on running for Congress right now, but in fact, I closed my medical office in December, and that was after 4 decades of that kind of work, so it was kind of an emotional moment for me to finish up, but you know, you got to close one chapter so you can start the next one.
Yeah.
So here we go. I'm doing a little part-time work just to keep food on the table, but basically done with that, ready to move on.
So you live in that beautiful town of Chestertown?
It is, yes. It's a lovely town.
It really is. And you're married, and I think you're a granddad, aren't you?
I have 2 beautiful grandchildren who unfortunately live too far away. They're in Minnesota.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. My the oldest is going to turn 6 next Tuesday.
Well, hospital care in Maryland must be an issue that's near and dear to your heart. Let's talk a little bit about affordable health care.
Okay. Big issue.
Yeah, it is. Huge.
Yeah.
And probably will be a big issue in this upcoming election.
Yes.
And people need to know how you feel about it. So let us know.
Okay. Well, it's hard to know where to start. Let me tell you that in my life, I've seen patients in my office, real life patients with real life problems every day. And I hear stories of all kinds. And many of them, Phil, I would say that there wasn't a day that went by that I did not find at least one person who said to me that they're just in a bind because they don't have insurance, they're working, but they may be working in a small business that does not provide employer-provided insurance. They're not wealthy enough, or they didn't feel like they earned enough money to buy private insurance, but they earned too much money to have Medicaid. And so they were in this position that 50 million Americans were finding themselves in, of being in the middle. And these people hoped that they would never get sick. And most of the time they did fine. But of course, we don't plan for a broken hip. We don't plan to get cancer or pneumonia or stroke. And then when such things happen, these people often were in a position of basically going bankrupt. And so we needed to do something about that system. It just wasn't working right. And so the Affordable Care Act, for all its blemishes, and let me tell you, I would not have written it the way it is, but here it is. It does do a very good thing, and that is it allows access for people. Many more Americans now have and will have, as this unfolds, access to health care insurance. Once we get that done, we got another big problem, and that is health care is really costing too much money. And what we have to do is start focusing on how do we reduce the cost but maintain or even improve the healthcare outcomes. And we can do it. I know we can do it from my own personal experience and background, but also from looking around the world and seeing other countries that spend less money but have better healthcare outcomes. So we know it can be done. And I want to get in there and be your congressman so I can start working on it.
Well, that certainly is maybe one of the biggest issues ahead of you if you are successful in Congress, and certainly for all of us.
Yeah.
Other issues important to those of us on the Eastern Shore, in your opinion?
Oh, well, I think the economy's got to be number one. I know many people on the shore raise a family and then find that when their kids grow up, they might finish high school or whatever, and there's just no jobs for them. So we've got to get good paying jobs back here on the shore. That's got to be number one. Other issues, of course, is we're all concerned about the environment, and there's been a lot in the news lately about what seemed to be conflict between environmentalists and farmers. But in fact, we all want the same thing. We want a healthy economy, and we want a healthy bay. And we want our children to be able to enjoy the same things that we have been able to do with, forests and air and streams and our bay. So, these are major challenges, and I'm eager to get in there and start working on them because I think our current representative is just obstructing things and not really moving us forward.
Our current representative is there partly as a result of a midterm election in which the Tea Party, let's call them the right wing of the Republican Party, was able to take almost a controlling number of seats in the Congress. Do you think that there will be, how do you see this coming election in relation to all those folks who have had a shot at running government, forcing their issues, etc.? How do you see this election in that light?
Well, it's a great question, Phil, and it's going to be interesting to see how the voters go this fall. But I think that people are starting to see exactly what happens when they vote for individuals who go to Congress with the idea of just stopping it and doing nothing, that in fact that doesn't promote our well-being. It's not really helping us. And I think it's time that we get past that and move on to some real problem solving. Like when you and I were kids and government used to work, and when people who were Republicans or Democrats would work together for the benefit of our country. Today we have people who seem to go there to focus just on their ideology or their party. And I think it's time to put people above politics. And that's what I would aim to do.
Yeah. Well, people from both parties have said, I'm tired of government not working, all this, there's gridlock, etc. What's your definition of a good working federal government?
Well, that's a great question. I think we need to go back to class here or something to talk about it. But basically, I think government needs to be as lean and mean as it can be, because they are dealing with taxpayers' dollars, and we want to make sure that we have minimized waste, fraud, and abuse. There's no question about that. But there are certain things that the government has to do, the federal government has to do, that we can't do without. For example, maintain the security of our country, so the military, There are many other functions that happen behind the scenes that when it goes right, people they don't see or even know that anything's happening, For example, when you set your alarm in the morning, how do you know it's 6 o'clock when you push that snooze alarm? Well, it's because the Bureau of Standards and Measures have this atomic clock, and they make sure that the time is correct. Well, nobody stops to think about that. Nobody stops to think when they're in a grocery store that, well, somebody's actually monitoring the antibiotics that go into that milk or the chicken or whatever, or make sure that there's no salmonella in the eggs, or, so when government's working, people don't see anything, largely, And
I guess the health department,
yeah,
You were involved with the health department.
That's
That's
right.
another example.
That's right.
If everything's going well,
Right.
you don't even think about the health department being there.
People don't hear from me
Yeah.
unless there's a problem. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
Or unless there's some educational or warning thing that has to happen. But yeah, I've been working in public health now for a couple of decades, and it's been very rewarding, but it gives a different perspective. You know, instead of just the patient right in front of you, now all of a sudden the community is my patient, so I have to start thinking in terms of broader issues, things like hunger, obesity, poverty, cancer rates, pollution, other things that affect the health of the entire community.
Yeah.
So this kind of brings me naturally to be thinking more about policy, and that brings me to government.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there are some statistics in relation to the Maryland counties on Delmarva, health-wise.
Yeah.
The statistics don't look all that good. There's a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah.
Cancer rates is just one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's definitely room for improvement, and it's a complicated issue. And I'm not, and I don't say that I have all the answers, but you know, part of it, Phil, I think, is inherent in the fact that we live in a very rural area. So, for example, some of the advances with treatment of stroke has to do with getting treatment within, say, 60 minutes of the event. Well, if you're living, you know, 15 minutes away from a hospital, that's one thing. But if you have your stroke and you're in a tractor out in the back 40 and nobody even finds you there for 3 hours, you know, you're way past the golden hour and so forth. That's an example.
Yeah.
Also, well, there are many other things that structurally like that make it difficult. But of course, we have the advantage of living in this beautiful area. So.
Well, that's the advantage of it.
Yeah.
And surrounded by beautiful farmland. And of course, agriculture is our #1 industry.
Yeah.
And you already touched on that environmentalists and agricultural people don't necessarily have to be at loggerheads.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm told, John, that it takes a little bit of money to run for Congress, for the United States Congress. Your staff has just told us that you've reached a milestone in raising funds, which is great. What's your opinion of the Supreme Court decisions, 2 of them, that pretty much allow unlimited anonymous donations to candidates for office?
Yeah. Well, I think most people agree that the increase of money in politics has gone way too far, and the appearance, if not the reality, of buying votes or influencing votes, let's say, by certain individuals with lots of money, the risk is there for this to happen. This is not the kind of country that I would like to see. And so I think that the 2 Supreme Court decisions you're talking about, one was 4 years ago with Citizens United, and the more recent one last month with McCutcheon. The first one basically said that corporations and people are equivalent, and that and also that money is equivalent to free speech, and so because of the First Amendment, corporations can spend unlimited money, basically is what they said on political issues. That was the first one. The one more recently eliminated the cap, the aggregate cap that one individual can spend in a given cycle. It was, I mean, poor thing. People could only spend, I think it was $138,000. Wasn't that awful? You know, per cycle. That's on direct candidates' donations. Now that limits off entirely. Now the individual contribution limit of $2,600 per person, and if anybody's watching, please don't send me more than $2,600, per a piece. But that's still there. But the aggregate limit has been removed, and you know it's just one more step in the wrong direction. You know, I believe that our forefathers gave us a country of the people, by the people, and for the people, and that means that all of us, not just those who have a lot of money.
Well, good. Good. I certainly agree with that answer. There are certain issues that local government and local people think, well, this is our bailiwick. This goes for the state government as well as federal government. Don't be telling us what to do. Zoning is one example of that. Another is education. And as the state becomes more involved financially in local education issues, then they set certain standards, etc. What should be the federal government role in education?
Well, that's another big issue, and of course one that I do have definite opinions about, so I'll tell you that I believe that early education is the foundation that allows Americans to really appreciate the American dream, and that is to have a level playing field so that if you work hard and you study hard and you try hard, you have as equal chance of succeeding as anybody else. Unfortunately, we really today do not have an equal level playing field. And we have, because of the structure of financing for local schools resting on the local property taxes. What that means is that wealthy neighborhoods can afford well-paid schools. And those schools, therefore, and not that money is everything, but money has a big influence on attracting the best teachers, having the best facilities, having computers, having all the access for their students. And so we don't have a level playing field, and kids who are raised in neighborhoods that are poor are going to have poorer schools, and means that they don't have an equal chance. So I think the federal government or state government could do something to help change the structure of the funding so that kids, I want to see every kid have a qualified teacher in every classroom. And you know, I would say this, that every person that I've ever met in my life who's been successful, when I've asked them, has somebody influenced you in your life, they remember a teacher from early education that inspired them. And
absolutely,
we need to have those kind of teachers out there, and we need to let them do their work. Now, I think that federal government, whether it's No Child Left Behind or Race to the Top or the current, what's the name of the? Common Core, right? All these different programs are well-meaning, but they all seem to leave the grassroots teacher out. And sometimes there's too much emphasis on testing to get, and not enough on the good old-fashioned teaching in the classroom. Yeah. So I have a number of thoughts on this, Phil. One is that I think we need to level the playing field. We need to make sure that every child has access to a quality education. And I'd like to see a good qualified teacher in every classroom.
With your background, or maybe despite your background, what committees would you hope to be on in the next Congress of the United States?
I'd like to be on all of them, but I think obviously health would be one. Science is another one. You know, we have to really look forward to have a long-term approach dealing with what's happening with our world. And global climate change is a real thing. It's no longer something that we can debate, even though, in fact, our current sitting congressman doesn't seem to believe in it. I don't get that. I think I'd like to be on the science committee. We have a lot of issues that have to do with energy, with many scientific issues. So that's another one I'd like to be on too. Yeah. And if I could choose one more, it would be one on government reform, fairness in government.
Oh, yeah, good.
Because I have some very specific ideas about ways that we can reduce the hyperpolarization that we're seeing now in our government, which is just destroying our country. And so we can fix that.
There are certain issues that are so regional, so multi-state, that they by definition have to be federal issues. One is the Chesapeake Bay.
Yeah.
And, you know, Maryland by themselves can't solve the problem of the Chesapeake Bay without Pennsylvania or the District of Columbia, et cetera.
Sure.
What role do you think, and are we making satisfactory progress in cleaning up the Chesapeake Bay?
Sure. Well, let me just say that I think a lot of progress is being made. I was just earlier today at the Center for Agroecology and talking with a person who was instrumental in getting the cover crop program initiated, for example. And so I think we're making some positive strides. We're looking at ways. I was at last Friday at a Riverskeeper meeting and talking about the quality of the streams, which of course feed in. But it's a complex issue. Like you say, it involves multiple states. For instance, what to do about the silt buildup above Conowingo Dam. This is a quandary, and it's not one state can take responsibility for the whole thing. Mm-hmm. I think this has got to be a conglomeration of multiple states, private industry, foundations. Everybody's got to work together on this one to get this resolved. But we all have a common goal, and that is we want the oyster harvest back. We want healthy crabs. We want people to be able to swim in the bay and be able to see the bottom like we used to. But we've got a long way to go for that. But we're making some progress.
Yeah. Well, one of the issues is the local government's sewage disposal efforts. Most of the ones that I'm familiar with have some federal money in the form of loans or grants. Yeah. Certainly small towns. Small town of 300 people or 500 people that puts in a sewage disposal couldn't afford that on their own. And congressmen oftentimes are important in being the link to the federal government. Do you see yourself as a link to local governments?
Absolutely. I think that the person who is the congressman from Maryland District 1 should be absolutely a champion for the Bay and for all the issues concerning that, as we had for 18 years with Wayne Gilchrist, who, by the way, has endorsed me in this race. Oh. Which I'm very happy to know. Yeah, he's a great guy, and he really worked hard, and still is. It still is with his ecological school that he's running now. And so, absolutely. In fact, it's interesting you mentioned, because just last night I had a meeting of the Midshore, meeting of the Eastern Shore Association of Municipalities. Oh. Happened to be here in Salisbury.
Oh, okay.
It was going to be with a ball game, but it got rained out.
Well, yeah, the shorebirds.
Yep.
Well, we're real proud of them.
Yep.
Real proud. And that's a good example of a local person by the name of Frank Perdue, who loved baseball and wanted us to be able to see minor league baseball here.
Yep. Perdue Stadium. It was beautiful.
He put his money where his wishes were.
Right.
Yeah.
I got tickets to use later.
Well, good. Well, we'll look forward to seeing you come back. Jobs and the economy. I hear this every time I turn the TV on. Somebody says, we need to have better jobs and a stronger economy. How can the United States Congress put those words into action?
Yeah, you're exactly right. You hear this all the time, but you hardly ever hear people saying specifically what would they do. How are you going to get more jobs? And I can tell you, I have many different ideas on this. I'll give you a few of them. One of them is that, you probably know this, that here on the Eastern Shore, we've got a trunk line of fiber optics going all up and down the shore. And it's connected here and there, but most people don't have any connections at all. They call it the last mile problem. It's who's going to pay for that last mile?
Yeah.
Is it going to be the customer? Is it going to be the company? Is it going to be the government? And everybody is pointing fingers to somebody else. So we've got to deal with this last mile problem, but we've got to put people back to work to get this out there, because, Phil, in the 21st century, everybody deserves to have broadband internet. It's essential for students, for business people, for everybody. Hospitals, libraries, colleges, doctors, everybody needs it. So let's build this up. It'll help us in so many different ways. That's one. Another is, we have many colleges here on the shore, community colleges and four-year colleges, and what happens is we don't have much of interaction with businesses and the colleges to make sure that the students are being trained to actually have the kind of jobs that will fit what the businesses need. So what we can do is encourage partnerships and apprenticeships so that students can start working in the businesses, and when they're done and they get their degree, they're ready for work and they have a job to go to. That would be a tremendous idea. Many other ideas. Look, infrastructure. This has been mentioned many times. You've heard the term shovel ready. Mm-hmm. There are programs, we have crumbling roads and bridges and other infrastructure projects that can be done. And this will put people back to work. And when people have these jobs in their community, they're going to spend that money on other businesses so that we all thrive. There are many other ways. I think that increasing the minimum wage, which just got passed in the Maryland State Legislature, is a good idea, and that should be a nationwide thing. We should all together, it shouldn't be just state by state. The whole country should raise up the minimum wage, and that'll put more money in the pockets of people who really need it and will spend it. We can also, this may seem a little backwards, but by extending long-term benefits for the unemployed, I think that has a positive benefit on jobs because, again, it allows people to have money to spend on necessities that's going to then produce consumers that'll allow businesses to flourish. Yeah. There are many, many different things we can do.
Yeah. Well, the infrastructure issue, after the winter we've got some roads and bridges, and maybe they've been crumbling for a while, but a bad winter like we've just had makes them even worse, makes it more of a glaring problem.
Be careful if you have a small car, you might get lost in a pothole.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. Well, Dr. John, it's a long campaign. You have a lot of territory to cover. You mentioned Wayne Gilchrist, who was a guest on this program 3 times while he was in Congress. We've actually invited him to come back after he got out of Congress to reminisce a little bit. I haven't gotten him back yet.
Great.
But we hope you'll come back quite a few times. This is kind of early in the campaign. There may be some issues that will come up that will be very pressing, and we'd like to ask you to come back and talk about them if the need arises.
Phil, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'll come back as many times as you'll have me.
Well, good. All right.
How about that?
Thank you. Dr. John LaFerla, candidate for Congress, 1st Congressional District. We appreciate your being here. All right.
Thanks, Phil.
And we want to thank you also for being with us on this special segment of One-on-One right here on PAC14.
One-on-One is sponsored in part by a generous grant from PNC Bank.